Hey, and welcome to another episode of Unbottleneck, the podcast where we solve common digital marketing problems. And today we're starting with a core problem that a lot of small businesses have, and that is around web design. Not just about getting traffic to your site, but having a site itself. And with us, our guest is Travis. Travis is the founder and CEO of Glide, a values-driven digital creative agency based in Austin, Texas, one of my favorite cities in the world, by the way. Their focus is to work with startups, nonprofits, and difference makers, all passionate and wanting to do amazing things. The Glide mission is to create digital experiences that are beautiful, useful, and produce lasting results. On the board, he's also on the board of Entrepreneur Organization, giving back to his business community. And Travis has a full-on ninja course in his backyard. Travis, thanks so much for joining us today, and tell us about this ninja course.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm 43 now, just turned 43, but back when I was turning 40, I thought, I want to do something big. And it just so happened that my family, I have four kids at the time. It was my two daughters were really big into ninja. We started watching American Ninja Warrior. We got like hardcore into it. And so I went and bought this this strap, you could like strap to trees that has all these rings and monkey rings on them. The kids loved it, and I was like, that's not enough. We need to go bigger, right? So I think my life motto is, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. So I spent, I don't know, probably a couple of weeks researching and looking on the internet for people that have built ninja courses in their backyard. And I purchased SketchUp, which is a 3D design program. And I just designed my own, ninja course. And then I built it. Now I'm in Texas, and in Texas, there's like 6 inches of actual dirt, and then it's just solid rock,
Yeah.
So I had to rent a pneumatic jackhammer.
Oh my God.
And I spent
I'm just picturing you out there in the backyard doing a jackhammer thing, and your family just looking out the window going, what is he doing?
I'm talking like a 50 pound, the kind you would see in a movie. Right.
Yeah.
But I spent 2 solid weekends just jackhammering holes into solid rock,
Oh
so
my
I could
God.
get these big 16-foot posts into the ground. I don't know what I was thinking. I probably broke a bunch of like deed restrictions on my house,
Yeah.
putting this course in. But it's great. It's done. The kids loved it. We've been goofing around on it for years, and no one's gotten hurt. I did take a galvanized pipe to the eye.
Okay.
I had to drive myself to the ER
Oh my God.
in the middle of the night because my wife was here and with the
Yeah.
kids, and she couldn't drive me because it was like I was working out there at 12 o'clock at night.
Oh.
But other than that, so there are blood, sweat, and tears, in the course. But anyway, that's probably longer than you needed. We're not.
So you got injured more making the course than performing on it.
Yeah, totally. But it's great. Maybe I can send you a picture or something like that.
Yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great. So we're going to talk about essentials of design. That's so many businesses out there are focused on client acquisition that they don't stop to really think about what kind of presentation they're giving to people who visit their website. What's the message? What does their website convey about who they are as a brand and their company? And you'd mentioned, on your website and in the past, that the mission of Glide is to create digital experiences that are beautiful and useful and produce lasting results. Can we break each one of those down? Like, what makes for a beautiful digital experience for users?
That's an awesome question. And, it kind of goes back to the Glide ethos, right? So the Glide ethos, we call it beauty and results. And a lot of times when you think of beauty, you're immediately thinking of presentation, of aesthetics, of visuals. But, we look way beyond that. To us, beauty is simplicity, right? It is usability.
Right.
It is brevity, clarity, humanity, right? Like in all of these terms, these entity terms, whatever these terms, they all relate to what I call a delightful digital experience, right? So I love the word delight. To me, delight is such a pleasant word because it means that you are like surprised in a good way. If you think about beautiful things tend to do that to you, and so obviously I come from a background in architecture. I got my degree in architecture and in timeless design principles like form follows function, right? Less is more, Mies van der Rohe.
Sure.
And so we have kind of unabashedly stolen a principle from another organization much larger than us, Huge Inc. If you're familiar with them, they're a very
No.
large global digital agency.
Okay.
They have a principle they call less but better, right? So
Mm,
I think there's an element of beauty that always comes with the simplicity. And the less but better concept is to remove the clutter and to magnify what remains. And I think
mm,
that typically when you see things that are beautiful, that is one of the defining traits. There's a simplicity to them, and what remains is magnified. It's very rare that you have something that's extremely cluttered, at least in a digital experience. But
sure. And I've
yes,
seen some of the work that you've done, and it's spectacular. Next is useful, right? How does the site need to be useful?
so useful is to me an element of usability, right?
Okay.
And I think that in the grand scheme of things, people really honestly don't care, like in the business world, what your website looks like. For the most part, they have a problem and they're trying to solve it, and they have a pain point, and your product or service is not the hero of their
Mhm.
experience on your website.
Right.
They are the hero of their story, and you are the expert guide, and you are not going to accomplish that through a bunch of whiz bang, parallax scrolling and all these other fancy animated motion and things like that. These
Sure.
types of things should augment the experience, but really what it comes down to is people want to solve a problem, and I think if you can help them solve a problem in an elegant and beautiful way, then more power to you. I have a quote on my wall back here that says, don't make something unless it is both necessary and useful, but if it is both necessary and useful, don't hesitate to make it beautiful. And the whole concept is,
Nice.
useful comes first, right? Form follows function, right? So,
Sure.
so anyway, that to me is when you talk about effective is it solves the problem.
Hmm.
Efficient is it solves the problem with the least amount of effort, right? So
Yep.
I think useful has those components in it.
I love that. I think Shopify does, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but Shopify does such a great job when I think of usefulness because um, it's kept me off Instagram quite a bit. Whenever I see an ad on Instagram, I find that within 30 seconds I've made a purchase with one hand, right? Because Shopify just makes that mobile experience, since you've already used their shop app and everything. Within seconds, you're able to find the product that you like, go through that checkout process with a few taps of your thumb, and then hate yourself after for being so impulsive. So,
Mm, so true.
producing lasting results. What are those results that you consider to be stressful and lasting, or
Sure. Yeah.
successful and lasting? Yeah.
Successful. Yeah. So again, the glide ethos of beauty and results, right? So
Yeah.
I look at it as a Venn diagram. There are many people that want something that looks nice. There are many people that could care less about what it looks like and just want the results. But I think great companies, great marketing folks, they want both, right? You want to beautifully represent your brand,
Hmm.
but you want to accomplish business objectives. So to me, the definition of results is the technical acumen to deliver on business objectives, right?
Okay.
So you start with kind of who are the people that are coming to their website, all right? In the context of websites, right?
Hmm.
Or digital experiences for that matter. What are they looking for, right? And then how can we help them and make that easier for them?
Sure.
And so that the end result is more people do what you want them to do. I think that on a really great project, there is no reason why you shouldn't see a 2 to 4x increase in any engagement metrics, whether it's primary calls to action, like
Sure.
on a B2B website, filling out a consultation request or a
Clicking a
demo
phone
request.
number, right?
Yeah. Or a secondary call to action, like, hey, download this white paper, stuff like that. There's
Hmm.
just no reason why that's not possible. I think that through a thoughtful process, and sometimes I think that if you don't start from the place of, okay, who are the personas, what are their user paths, what are the pain points? Have you actually talked to real customers through stakeholder interview? Have you done a survey to understand what in mind for repetitive strategies that could be, or repetitive or recurring themes and feedback from the client and customers that are
Sure.
visiting the site that could turn into strategies and tactics
So,
for them.
here's a tough one for you then on that topic. A lot of businesses are super busy trying to run their business. So, when those types of questions come up, and you say, "Hey, have you done this?" and have you taken the time to do all these things? And the business is like, "Look, I'm just trying to survive the pandemic. I've got a budget. I need to build a website. do you sort of jump in and say, no problem, give us the name of some of your clients, and we'll do some of that grunt work, or is your success dependent on the client getting deeply involved in the beginning with a lot of that work?
I think it's twofold. I mean, I definitely think that a project is more successful with a highly engaged partnership or
Right.
collaboration. It's very rare that you could
I
just
agree to
kind of
that.
throw a check over the fence and expect a great result, and
Yeah.
not be involved in the project process itself.
Sure.
But I will say that great agencies have the wherewithal, right, to
Yep.
to start and finish. Like a good example is like an email survey, right?
Sure.
Most great companies have some type of mailing list, right? Let's say
Right.
they have 10,000 people in their mailing list. Well, you know, the nice thing about this is if a good proportion of that is past customers are like more than likely to respond. I mean, you might get a 30 to 40% response rate on an email that says, "Hey, we're trying to improve ourselves and improve our website. We would love your feedback." Maybe you could throw in a free iPad, for like one lucky person or whatever. But the point is, you're going to get all of your feedback within the first 24 or 48 hours. And if you can try to figure out a way to have quantitative, feedback and qualitative, because obviously no one wants to sift through 1,000 emails.
Yeah.
um, so you could stack rank features that are important or areas that of friction that you already know, and have them kind of rank those, and then algorithmically, you could have 10,000 people give feedback that would give you really great customer voice. So
Sure.
we could do something like that with the client. With all they got to do is give us their mailing list, or we could give them the email, and then they could send that themselves. And
That's got to be a huge relief to a lot of businesses, like I could mention, that are under resourced, especially our larger brands. I think we were talking about that a little bit earlier before the show started, about how larger brands are, the folks that are working in the digital marketing departments are carrying a lot of responsibility, and they want to do as much hands off as they can and still see results. So it's great that that there are businesses like yours that are willing to take the baton and say, but don't worry, don't, I'm not going to add more work to your plate. Here's what we need from you to help you through that. I think
yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And just the iterative approach would be also just, I mean, depending on the client, what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, sometimes just very basic best practice. We have a client that's a small business owner. I think they have about 15 employees. They're here in Austin, serve a regional audience. And, they had just some basic fundamental things. Like, even if we weren't going to engage with them, they could go and it's like, just add a primary call to action here and
Yeah.
here. And I
Do you
guarantee,
realize your buy now button is gray?
yeah, like sometimes it's like, it's literally like, if they have, it's like, wow, you could 2x your conversion by just doing these three things, right?
Yep.
So
I love that. Well, speaking of conversion and user experience, how do you define user experience in web design?
so I think user experience in general is just the totality of the customer experience, right? As they engage with your brand. I mean, it's more than just a website, right? But as we kind of dial into the website or the digital, specifically the web experience, to me, it's that you look at the customer journey and you say, okay, I have a need, I have this awareness of a need, and I'm going searching, right? I've I'm in Google, or I've clicked on a link on a referenced brand or an email or in social media, and I arrive on your site, and it's the experience that they have as they go through trying to accomplish their goal.
Yeah.
And where are they meeting with obstacles? Where are they able to succeed? And do they arrive at the ultimate result that they were trying to go for? And so the user experience is that entire experience. It's emotional. If you look at the customer journey,
Mhm.
there's pain points, there's success, right? I found a solution that's speaking to me, that it can describe my problem better than I can. Wow, this is what I've always been looking for. Now I go to the form and I try to fill it out and I can't, right? Or whatever. So to me, the user experience is the totality of the user experience specifically to your website, from the place where they arrive on your website to the place where they leave your website. And did they accomplish the goal that they were trying to accomplish? I mean, that is
Excellent.
the essence of good UX, right? Is to help people do what you want them to do.
Yeah, and I think when we look at other digital marketing mediums, UX affects all of them. It affects referral traffic because people are going to bounce if they don't find what they need. It affects SEO because they're going to go back to Google search results and choose a competing listing, and Google's going to see that behavior over time and start to demote the listing. Thinking about that UX again, what do you feel are the most important elements of a strong and successful user experience? What are sort of a couple best practices that webmasters can pay attention to?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. I have a trouble being concise. I'm going to try to be concise. I think a lot of times when you engage with an agency as a brand or as a business or an organization, you kind of in your head assume there's some strategy going on, but really ultimately you're like, okay, show me the design. So they think a lot of times when they engage to do a redesign effort on a website, it's like, okay, well, what does the homepage look like, right? Whatever, or like, maybe there's some content or information architecture or sitemap. But you always want to start. I would say the elements of user experience. There's this great book, the elements of user experience, right? It's come out, many years ago, and I love the idea of these planes, right? So this concept of planes. So you kind of start with a strategy plane, and the strategy plane is who are the people that are coming to the site and what are their needs, right? And I would almost go back to if it's B2B, it might be the ICP, right? Is the ideal customer profile. And the ideal customer profile is black and white. It is organizations that have 10 to 1,000 employees with revenue of $10 million or more. Things like that. And then the personas inside those, right? Like who are the champions and the influencers inside those organizations that are arriving on this site? Who are the decision makers? And I think in today's business climate, for most organizations that aren't brand centric, and consumer centric, decisions are being made as teams, right? So you have to think about all the people that might potentially be visiting the website. So user needs, again, trying to go fast. User needs, side objectives, right? And then you kind of move up a notch in another plane, and now you're kind of in like kind of trying to kind of understand the scope. And this
Sure.
might be the content requirements. What type of content, and it might be the existing website in a
Hmm.
legacy or new. And then also like, are there specific functionalities? Like if you're a multi-location, and you have 150 locations, then, you really have to think through how right now, we have a client and they have dental offices, right? So
Okay.
they have about 200 locations nationwide.
Sure.
And each of these locations, what we start to realize is the brand almost becomes transparent, because when a mom is trying to get her daughter braces, right, she wants to get to the doctor's office and see who are the doctors,
Hmm.
where's the location, how far am I going to have to drive. It's like
Right.
we
And
don't want.
reviews, of
Yeah,
course.
so and so like, thinking about that experience of getting her to there, that's the functional and then we go up a notch, another plane, into the structure of everything, and that's the information architecture. Information architecture and UX kind of go, really are well connected and go hand in hand, because that is how people flow through the information.
Right.
And then another thing we think about, in the information architecture, is you take those personas and you take their hopeful goals, and you map the flow, which is called user flow. And so once you have all that, then you can start designing things. And usually it depends on, how much time we have, how quickly we're trying to get to market. But we
Hmm.
might do either story frames, or wireframes, or low fidelity designs to kind of iterate and prototype. If we have the ability, if the timeline allows, and if the client has the budget for it, we would want to
Right.
actually go and get validated user testing, either unmoderated or moderated. um, and then from there, we move into, the visual design plan. Sometimes we, in our industry, we kind of talk about what we do, and sometimes when I try to summarize it, I say, hey, look, it's the right person finding the right information at the right time.
Hmm.
And another way to think about it is, who are the people, at least a user experience as it pertains to a website experience. You could say, who are the people that are coming to the website?
Yeah.
What are they looking for? And how do we make it easier for them to find? I mean, when you think about most website experiences, especially in B2B or in a business context, there is someone who has arrived in their customer journey, and in a place of awareness. I have something that I need to do. And, if you think about a user experience, you can think, okay, I'm trying to do something. So a user experience is their entire experience of doing that thing, right? So if I'm a marketing manager, in my VP of, demand generation, or the CEO, comes to me and says, hey, look, we want to redesign our website.
Hmm.
The first thing they're going to do is say, okay, let's go and look around and see, maybe they've been referred, maybe they have a couple of folks they've worked with in the past. Regardless,
Right.
they go searching in organic search, or they go to visit websites, and it's that entire experience front to back, right? That is the user experience. And I think sometimes when you talk about user experience, it can be esoteric, because you're just talking about it at a very high, like kind of academic level. But if you think about that, I just want to schedule my pet's, grooming appointment, right? What does that look like? Okay, well, I'm going to go to, PetSmart. I'm going to punch in my zip code. I'm going to find a location. I'm going to book it. what is that experience? And so and then what you could do from our perspective, right? You could look at
Mhm.
that in terms of planes. So you have at the top, you have a business is trying to accomplish a goal, right? They are trying to sell a service. So these are the objectives of the website. And then you have on the opposite side of that same coin, you have the user needs, right? A user is trying to accomplish something. So
Right.
it kind of always starts there. And then you just move your way through into greater levels of fidelity until you get all the way to the visual plane, if you will. But as you move through it, you kind of think about, okay, well, on the side of the organizational needs, there's functionality requirements. So if you have a multi-location franchise like PetSmart,
Mhm.
it might be, okay, we're going to need a find a store functionality. So
Right.
we're going to need, and in considering that's a business to consumer, it's going to be mobile probably. So people are
Sure.
going to be on their phone at a soccer game, and so we're going to need to make sure that we use GPS of a mobile device in order to auto map people's location, so they don't have to type in their zip code. And and the whole idea is, how do we create a process? And I love the word delight. To me,
Yeah,
delight
Google
is such
uses
a
that
great
all the
word.
time. Delightful experience. Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because delight is, to me, it's about being surprised. It's about exceeding people's expectations in a way where a thing that they're trying to do is easier than they thought it was going to be,
Right.
and it creates a great brand experience. It creates a great user experience, and and there's just it. Sometimes it's subtle. It's subtlety. It could be what people call these days motion UI. It might just be
Yep.
that the interface itself is like buttery smooth. Obviously it loads quickly, but also just the way things move on the page. And it could be just that it's clear and simple. That buttons aren't super tiny. They're not positioned in locations that make it hard for your finger to reach. So I'm kind of meandering a little bit, but these are just some of the anecdotal examples of what I think user experience is about.
Yeah, I think it's from beginning to end, right? I several times I've purchased from even the restaurant chains we work with, and I've complained and I've said I can't order this thing. I can't customize this item the way I could if I called it in. I can't, um, I have to keep putting in my information over and over and over again. It's getting really annoying, right? It's just like you said, having somebody just have a full on smooth, simple experience. I saw what I needed. I found it quickly. I had options. I wasn't overwhelmed by it, and I was able to check out and purchase with the most minimal effort possible.
Yeah,
And I think that's at least for e-commerce. That's a big. I think that's a really big need for
yeah.
sure.
I mean, I recently I decided to donate some money to Austin Pets Alive, which is
Okay.
a pet shelter here in Austin, and
Oh, cool.
I went through this process, and they had an iframe for their donation page, which is
Oh
pretty
my God.
common. Obviously, it averts things like PCI compliance being a need, and
Sure.
but there's a slot where you can kind of donate in the name of. And I had a dog who passed away. Her name was Molly. I love her. She was
Mm.
my dog soulmate. Had her for 14 years. And so, I checked the box to say, I'm going to, donate this in Molly's name. And I kind of wrote this little like story of Molly, like, cause they gave
Uh-huh.
you a spot for it.
Right.
And what I didn't realize was by checking that box and writing this story, it expanded down all of the functionality of the payment page below the field that the iframe allowed. So when I filled out all the
You couldn't click
information,
submit.
yeah, I couldn't
Oh my
submit it.
God.
I couldn't submit the payment. So I
Oh,
sat there
frustrating.
stuck, and I literally couldn't. I didn't understand because I didn't see it move down when I
Yeah.
checked the box, so I didn't know that's what broke it. So I had to
Mhm.
ditch all of that stuff that I wrote about my dog
Oh my
that was like near and dear to my heart, like putting tears in my eyes, and
God.
I mean, that's just a perfect example of a really terrible. I mean, I feel like if Austin Pets Alive hears this, please don't. You know, I reached out to them and
They're
said,
doing the best they can, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, they're doing the best they can, so I'm not going to throw them under the bus. But it was a little bit heartbreaking that I wasn't able to share that story with them because I think it would have
Yeah.
been poignant.
I remember my friend Aaron Irizarry years ago. Um, he gave a speech at a local search event once, and he was making some really interesting points. One of the clients he'd worked with was Penny Saver USA, and back in the old days when you would try to place an ad on a page that has tons of things going on, it felt impossible to find out where you go to actually place an ad. You're like, okay, I'm here, looking around, I'm going through the menu, the nav, I'm going to the footer, where the heck is it? It was really frustrating. So one of the first things he did was he created a big orange button right at the top that said place an ad. Seemed like it was the most common sense, simple thing to do, but the business didn't know any better. These were publishers. These were people that that didn't have a lot of usability or website experience. They just created a place for people to place the ad that went in a physical newspaper that went out. And then he made it even simpler by saying step one, step two. So instead of this monstrous form that you end up having to fill out twice because you took too long the first time, or took too long in that first go at it. Um, Now it's broken into step one, step two, step three. So at least they can continue and save and go back and complete it if for some reason they couldn't fill out the rest of that application. So it seemed like a really common sense thing to do. But I remember him telling me the story because he got sort of like a standing ovation from the business the next day when all of a sudden they had this flood of people actually placing ads because it was so much easier that people weren't confused and lost. The other thing he said that really caught my attention was that when somebody gets to a page on your website, if they have to look at the navigation to figure out what to do, then your page might have failed. Like the page should tell them right away what it is they, should be doing or what it is that they're looking for. So I thought that was really interesting because, it makes a valid point. If I get to a page, I want to know, what should I be doing? What's my call to action? Is everything I need to know on this page, or do I have to surf around the website a little bit to figure things out? If you
Yeah.
have to think, it's a fail, right? You don't want the
Oh,
user to
yeah.
have to think.
Steve Krug, man, Don't Make Me Think is one of my favorite usability books for the web of all time. And, I think of like my brain just my synapses are firing, thinking of so many examples. But like I remember reading an article about Jeff Bezos when he was because he's kind of a little bit of a tyrant, at least from some of the things I've
Uh-oh.
read. But he talked about back when they were doing all of the AWS stuff, and he basically said everything you make, you have to use.
Yeah.
So like all the tools you're creating for the marketplace for people to use, you have to use those same tools to do the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
And then he said, and F you, have a great day. Like basically he was just like, and I think that's such a brilliant thing when you think about that. Like imagine if
Mm.
the person that made that payment form for Pets Alive, was forced to go through that experience,
Yeah.
or or any experience like this. I mean, imagine if the people that make tents, have to go and try to take a tent and roll it back up and put it in that tiny freaking bag that they give you that's never big enough.
Right.
Right. Like once it comes out of the factory and you take it out of that bag, it will never go back in that same. Like if that person was forced to roll up a tent and put it back in the bag, they would make the freaking bag bigger.
Mhm.
Like, and so it's just like I think that maybe like usability and the user experience would be so improved if people were forced to use the thing they were making
Right.
in a real world environment, not in a quasi testing just to see if it still works properly.
Sure. But
Uh,
actually use it in real life, use it just so they can see what their experience would be as a customer, not as a developer. I love that.
yeah.
That's speaking of those, those key points that can be really frustrating. Uh, what, in your opinion, are the most important elements of a strong or a successful user experience on a website? And I'm sure there's some, like, of course, mobile. We know mobile is important, right? And really thinking about how users are moving to mobile. But what else? What do you feel are like those important elements?
So, I mean, if we're talking about a website experience, to
Hmm.
me, it starts with where you land, right?
Okay.
And like you said, I mean, it really kind of depends on the acquisition channel. I mean, if you're searching, you may be arriving on an interior page of a website
Yeah.
versus like the homepage. I think a lot of times people put a ton of effort and energy into their homepage because that's just the traditional place that your brand exudes itself as an overview. But it's rare that your homepage is always going to be the page that people arrive at. Now, it's
Yeah.
usually a highly trafficked page, and it receives a lot of love in Google.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the homepage from an SEO standpoint is the page that shows up when somebody's searching for the brand. They already know the company, they know the website, they're accustomed to it. But when you're getting introduced to people who didn't search for the brand, like non-branded keywords, where those sub pages appear, you have a chance to make a first impression with someone, and that page is never anything like the homepage.
Exactly. So
I
you
love that.
so
Yeah.
you just touched on to me what is the most important thing, which is in the first
Yeah.
5 to 10 seconds, I need to know who are you and what do you do, and I think a lot of times that the most organizations fail really really bad. I think there's a pretty prototypical design these days that have a masthead with some headline or something like that.
Sure.
That I think most reasonably good
Right.
companies are good at accomplishing. But like you said, if you get dumped into an interior page and you're just in the middle of a conversation, and so first impressions, right?
Mhm.
And then also, what's next, right? There should, like you said, I mean, I used to always say that you should know where you are, where you can go, and where you've been, right? In the web language, you in the old days, links would be purple if you visited them and blue if you
Mhm.
haven't, right? Now that's long gone at this point, I think for the most part. But I still think that sites should be able to, convey that. And I think a lot of modern marketing websites, you don't have like really deep navigational sets, and so
Sure.
having breadcrumb navigation on a simple marketing website isn't always necessary. Although there's an argument for some type of breadcrumb in some way, shape, or form to just kind of show you where you're at in the site. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, really, it comes down to the context of like what device you're on, right? So if I'm on a tablet or I mean, we're seeing a huge shift, obviously, in mobile is I mean that's kind of almost come and gone. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Google's index is mobile first. The vast majority of traffic, especially for consumer, is mobile. Now,
For
business,
brands like Applebee's and Chili's, 84% of their traffic is mobile.
yeah, and if you look at why that's the case, you'll likely find that a lot of these brands are they're doing a lot of work with Facebook advertising or something like
Mm.
that. So if you're getting a lot of traffic from social media, it's just a foregone conclusion that the vast majority of that traffic, 90+%, is mobile.
Yeah.
And what we do is we have had a tough time designing for mobile first, because I think that sometimes when you design like truly mobile first, you almost have to design two whole sets of designs. When you
Mhm.
design desktop, then mobile, you can kind of extrapolate by stacking and scaling and things like that. But that's also kind of not preferred. So we actually do something we call unified design, where you design both at the same time.
Okay.
And I think that gives you the best of both worlds, where it doesn't create a lot of duplicity, where you're having to do the work twice.
Sure.
But anyways, so yeah, so I think from a user experience perspective, that, and then clear calls to action. That's pretty obvious, right? What are you trying to get people to do, and how do you make it easier for them to do it?
I think last time we talked about sticky buttons at the bottom or at the top of the page. I like them at the bottom for phone numbers and chat. I think it's within thumb's reach for those people who use their phone in portrait. I don't know a lot of people still that do that hold their phones landscape. I think a lot of people are still holding in portrait. So I feel like the conversion rate seems to be a little bit higher. People who visit the website are more likely to click on elements that are within thumb's reach of where they
Oh yeah,
are.
all
When
kinds
it's
of
in the
stuff.
header, you've got to go back up. Now you have to hold two hands, or you've got to slide your hand up and try to hold and balance without dropping your phone. So I feel like that footer sticky button. Have you seen anything with that being something that has helped or hurt user experience or bounce rates?
Oh yeah, there's so many tactics when it comes to UX design on what helps and what devices. And we had a client, Retail Me Not, and we redesigned the mobile navigation, so that it would be easier to reach the navigation, because we kind of designed it, and there was, you know when you look at the desktop, the way we designed it, it kind of made more sense in some ways to have things a certain way. And then and so it's just, but yeah, and also we even created a sticky navigation set in the that was affixed to the bottom of the mobile device,
Okay.
on that site, in order, with quick links. And so I think you can get really into the weeds on the the tactics that
I
work.
think they're all something worth testing if it makes sense for your industry, right? So it's
Yeah.
never just do this and it's going to work. And that's something I think business owners are probably the most scared of, is the fact that it's not just something they can pay for, be done, and move on. It's something that you've got to constantly be, A/B testing and multivariant testing to see what really resonates with your visitors. And that means, yeah, there's going to be a lot of investment. There's going to be a lot of time, effort, energy, involved in that process if you want to, really do a good job with user experience. But
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And in that process, so have you seen, some examples of like poor user experiences? You mentioned one a minute ago where you're filling out a form and it expanded and you couldn't hit submit. What's another example or some common examples you see of poor user experience?
Well, I mean, there's obviously the low hanging fruit of obvious, site speed. So a
Yeah.
site that's too slow. I mean, that is like a force multiplier to everything else being poor.
I remember Gary Isles said you had 2 seconds. If that page doesn't load in 2 seconds, they tend to bounce and go back and click another result.
Yeah, and there's kind of two elements to site speed. There's site speed from a perceived perspective, like the actual human being that's holding a phone
Yeah.
or browsing on a computer, and then there is how the bots and the algorithms look at your site, because Google page speed is kind of a bane to the life of
Yeah.
developers and SEO optimists, and
Yep.
because it's very
It's
arbitrary.
never consistent.
It's arbitrary, it's not consistent, it's algorithmic, and and obviously it does.
Those tools are their own worst enemy. Yep, I'm with
Yeah,
you.
I mean, and it correlates to the real world in certain ways, but a lot of ways it
Yeah.
doesn't. And especially when you have like an insane number of trackers on the site.
hmm
Um, and so that, and then when it comes to usability, for me, I think navigation is a huge one. One of the things that we have found time and time again is at this point now, 20 years in of building websites, I can probably tell you the age of a website within 3 to 4 years just looking at the navigation. like
Okay.
because like navigation says so much about a website. When you have a
Mm.
website that's got 3 layers of navigation, this is a tactic we used to use like back in the 2000s,
I remember.
because
Yep.
like the CEO and the marketing director wanted every single link of the site, in the navigation, and we thought, okay, well, we'll just do multiple layers. That'll make it easier for
I
people.
remember those days. Yep.
Um, Another tactic that's kind of gone by the wayside is having a drop down for every single item, where you have 5 to 10 sub navigation items, or even flyouts to third level navigation. And this has been scientifically proven to increase cognitive load. I mean, there's a
Mm.
term, and it basically is the paradox of choice, right? The
Yeah.
paradox of choice says if you give people too many options, they won't choose anything, you know? And so there's this inverse correlation between the options you give people and how much they engage. And so we have a term that we use that we have just shamelessly stolen from an organization. Huge is a very large design agency, and I mean, I don't know, they do everything, they're awesome, but they have a term called less but better, which is a derivation of less is more by Mies van der Rohe.
Mhm.
And we love it because the way we define it is you reduce the clutter and you magnify what remains. And
Yep.
so I think that, cluttered designs tend to, really scream poor user experience.
Mm.
And, honestly, I think that you can take a design that's extremely minimal and it will last 3 times longer. We have sites that we've built that are 10, 12 years old. And
Right.
like the client still likes it, like, and for whatever reason they haven't redesigned their site. We've moved on. We forgot about, whatever we forgot about them. And we look at the site, we're like, it aged really well. When you have good information architecture, and when you have like timeless design principles, like,
hmm
minimalist, focusing on calls to action, clear
Sure.
navigation, these sites can age really well. In this day and age, it seems like, people are redesigning their sites every 3 to 5 years, or
Yeah, it's fashion versus style, right? It's keep that style and it works, and it might change or just barely update a few elements on it to make sure it adapts to new mobile devices or whatever. But you're right; it makes more sense when you really think about keeping it simple, emphasizing what the important elements are by minimizing the things that they're not clicking on. That's where I'm sure the heat maps and other pieces come into play of ways to discover what people are actually using and what they're not, strip out what they're not, emphasize what they are using the most. Now that we are mostly on mobile, we don't have to worry about having as much for them to look at. Yeah, the desktop might look a little barren, but if only 15% are looking at it, who cares,
we call
right? You're
that designing at the expense of desktop. We will actually proactively encourage our UX teams on some projects to say, we had a couple client, um, they WCRA, World Champion Rodeo Association, and uh, like 95% of their traffic was mobile. you know and so we were like, you know what, the desktop experience is going to get the shaft, and we're okay with that, because it didn't make sense. It made sense to focus entirely on the mobile experience. And I will mention something you said earlier about A/B testing is, And I don't know who the audience of this podcast is, if it's, people that work at enterprise or if it's SME or
We've got
small.
marketers, entrepreneurs, and a lot of freelance SEOs.
So, there was a study that came out in 2017 that said um, you know, marketers will spend $93 to get people to arrive on their website through paid advertising and all of the different shenanigans that you're trying to do, to get people, and $1 to get them to convert. And it was this huge disparity. And I think that the answer to the reason why, they did a lot of research into this, and I wish I could find the authors of this. They're pretty awesome. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but they were like, the problem with conversion optimization is that it's multidisciplinary.
Yeah.
You can go and hire a company to do paid advertising or SEO or content marketing. But if you engage a consultancy that does CRO, the cost of that agency is like 10x.
Mhm.
you know, it's like, oh,
Most of the ones I've talked to, the site tuners and the conversion XL start at like $20,000 a
yeah,
month or something.
25 grand a month to me is probably the base. And it just doesn't. I mean, I have maybe one company that I know, conversion scientists. That these, I don't know if their prices ever right, and maybe they'll get a Google alert if this gets transcribed. But I think they're around 10 grand a month.
Okay.
That's the cheapest, and they're awesome. They're really good. But you need data scientists, you need developers, and most developers aren't, they don't know how to do and implement CRO and having multi-page or multivariate or use these testing tools that are very technical. They, it's not, I think sometimes it's scary. It's not as complicated as it really has to be. But the point is, you have to conceive the test, and then you have to track it, and then you have to interpret the results, and then you have to do something with the data, and that requires user experience and designers and
It requires a driver. Somebody needs to be in charge of all that, and it's not a role that most businesses typically have sitting around ready to do that kind of work.
yeah.
Um, and I know last time we've already talked quite a bit about mobile and mobile experience. I know both of us are big fans of both WordPress and Shopify. Any words of praise or warning about platforms, website platforms out there that you have for business owners that are like, hey, I'm going to create a new website and I'm ecom. Should I Shopify or stay away from X? And I'm lead gen, WordPress. Stay away from Joomla. Any suggestions as it relates to CMSs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jim Collins wrote a book, Great by Choice, and he talks about this
Okay.
concept of a smack recipe. For a business, the idea is that you have a list of your, how do you consolidate your business strategies? And the challenge is, you can't be everything to everyone. Early in our company's history, I tried to support Expression Engine, which I think is now long gone, and
Mhm.
Joomla and Drupal and WordPress and
Yep.
other platforms. And the problem is, you can't be an expert at every platform. And I think what you're seeing right now in the marketplace is actually the opposite of generalization. I think it's role specialization. I think some of the very best companies, especially if you want to scale and grow quickly, you have to find an audience, a specific audience, and then you have to deliver at a high level, to that audience. And so, I think that you do have to, in some ways, pick the platform that you want a specialist at. But at the same time, there's also this myopic kind of vision where, like, we don't want to say we make WordPress websites, because what if WordPress is out of favor in 5 years? I don't know. I love WordPress because it's ubiquitous and it's open source, and that's important
Mhm.
to me. Autonomy is important. Just not having that proprietary licensed
Sure.
platforms. But Shopify is a great platform. So my word of advice would be, embrace best practice, which means there are platforms that are widely supported, and it makes sense to support those. You build your business by being able to target a larger audience, so
Mhm.
that there is statistically more of a chance you're going to find someone that's interested in your services.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think that you need to have a beginner's mind, right? To what's coming down the road. So for example, I have a saying. I say, I don't want to be the first, I don't want to be last. you know because I don't want to suffer the pain of being the early innovator, that is out in the front, but I also don't want to suffer the pain of getting completely left behind. And so that's been our approach.
Makes a lot of
And,
sense. So
and
it also might make sense too for business owners to go with what the core competencies are of the folks they've chosen to work on the website. So somebody came to you because of your reputation, and you said, "We're going to suggest this platform." Right? For business owners, if your designer and your developers are looking at your scope of your project and they suggest a platform, they probably know what they're doing, right?
yeah, yeah, and I think that maybe it might not be a bad idea if you have any experience in the industry and someone's recommending something that you've never heard of, right?
Yeah,
You might want to say, ask a few more questions or get a second opinion.
sure.
I don't think that you should, if someone says, "Hey, we're going to build your website in WordPress," I don't think you really have to worry too much about is that the right platform. I mean, if they're really good at it and you trust them, then I would go with them. you know,
Can answer two questions in one. One of ours is any obvious or not so obvious risks that you feel like business and site owners should be taking as they approach website design. I think choosing the right CMS is probably at the core of that. So it's not something custom built by somebody who's kind of making up his own language and his own logic. So the next web designer gets in and goes, "Who did this?"
yeah.
Right? It's like trying to stick to some standards, right?
And so I do the sales at Glide, and I've had I mean, we've probably been a part of almost 1,000 projects in the last 20 years of some
Right.
type or size, or at least and so you can imagine I probably had like 5,000 conversations with potential clients over
I
all
know
these
the feeling.
discovery calls and needs analysis calls and proposals and so I love helping people and I love kind of talking with new potential clients and kind of coaching them and encouraging them on the path they should take. And I always encourage them that the best thing that you can do when you're starting out as a business owner or as a marketer, if you're a marketing professional and you're interviewing a company like Glide, is I
Mhm.
always recommend try to find at least three viable options. And what I mean by that is that you like their work, that you see yourself in their portfolio. So like if you're a landscaping company, they have other landscaping companies. If you are a tech SaaS membership platform, that they have other tech SaaS membership
You're an
platforms. And
attorney that they work with other attorneys. Yeah.
yeah, so number one, relevant experience, and then also that when you speak with them, you get that gut feeling. Even if you're not an expert in technology, most people that are hiring someone to build something have some type of savvy where they can listen to someone and just tell that they know what they're talking about.
Yep.
And so I always say, listen to that gut feeling. And then third is, are they within your price range? Because I think it's unfair, to find an organization that you love their work, that you feel like they're very trustworthy, but they're way outside of your price range, and then you're
Yep.
comparing them to another organization that's less trustworthy that is in your price range. So I always recommend, definitely try to find those three, and then that way you'll be able to make a qualified decision. And it requires some legwork. It requires you to go pound the pavement and and find other options if the folks you meet it don't
I
know.
love reporting too. I've asked a few times, hey, without disclosing who your clients are, could you show some examples of, a screenshot of an analytics showing conversion rate? I don't need to look at the numbers. I don't need to know the number. I just want to show me something that says what you did increased the number of people who are actually becoming customers who visit the website. And a lot of them are happy to show that. We don't know who their clients are. We don't know how much traffic they're getting. We just see the percentile. Heck, it could be, went from 2 visits to 4 visits. We don't know, but we
Yeah,
want to know that they know how to find that and that they care about it, and that those metrics are key to what they hold themselves accountable to with their clients. So I love that. Travis, I know we're getting short on time, and I know I've got to get going here in a second, but I want to make sure that everybody who's been listening to a couple of these different conversations that we have has a way that they can get a hold of you and ask some of their own questions about usability and conversion rate and about how Glide might be able to help them out. What's the best way they can reach you?
so honestly, just visit our website, glidedesign.com. Obviously wherever this is going to be digitally placed, hopefully there'll be a link.
Everywhere,
Yeah,
all the places.
yeah, pop-ups and everything. But
Excited.
so visit our website, and if they like what they see and they're interested, also, we're not obviously doing this necessarily to drive business, but just to help
Yeah.
people. So yeah, so if you're reaching out, don't think that you're having to reach out from a business context. I love answering questions, and
Mhm.
I could put my email, Travis at glidedesign.com. If you could put that in, wherever we post this as well,
Absolutely.
I'd be
For
more
sure.
than happy to respond.
Perfect. Well, you heard Travis. If you've got a question and you want to have him take a look at your site and make some suggestions, it's a great way for you to find somebody who can help you increase the number of people who are actually doing something on your website. I highly recommend it. And Travis, we've worked together for a while. Super, impressed at everything that you've been doing and excited to hopefully do another episode with you in the future. So thanks for joining us today. And guys, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been wonderful.